Princess Aurora destroyed her own reputation to force a marriage with Alexander G. For 4 years, she hid her identity and wrote him love letters with her left hand, letters meant for his true love. In return, he humiliated her in public and shoved a cold divorce agreement into her hands. When the truth finally surfaced, the savior he worshipped like a god turned out to be the vicious wife he despised. The war god of his generation ended up kneeling outside the Imperial Mausoleum, begging. Behind the vermilion gates, her voice was cool and distant. "General G, I don't like you anymore." With one snap of the clapper, the storyteller spoke of the young General Alexander G making a name for himself. With a second, he spoke of General Alexander G returning in triumph and catching Princess Aurora's eye. With a third, he spoke of Princess Aurora, willful and spoiled, insisting on marrying General Alexander G. Beside me, Chloe's face grew greener by the word. She kept stealing glances at me, her voice beginning to shake. "Princess, they're talking nonsense. You." I waved a hand, rubbed the red skin off a peanut between my fingers, and tossed it into a large bowl. "When is Alexander G coming?" My reputation for arrogance had spread everywhere. I didn't care what people outside said. The only thing that could stir my heart was the name Alexander G. Chloe glanced at the sundial. General G should be finishing morning court soon. In the half year since we married, this was the first time Alexander G had invited me to see an opera. So even if he arrived after the agreed time, I would wait. I lowered my head and kept shelling peanuts. Only when the bowl was full did the person I'd been waiting for finally push aside the curtain. He was just past 20, the space between his brows set in chill lines. When he looked at me, he frowned slightly. A flicker of impatience passed through his eyes. If I hadn't been watching him so closely, I might not have caught what he tried to hide. I lowered my lashes and slid the bowl toward him. Alexander G used to be picky. When he ate peanuts, he always wanted the red skin peeled off. I had waited for him for half an hour, peeled a whole bowl, just to hand it over in that moment, bright with joy, and say, "Husband, try some." I'd spent a long time dressing today, peach blossom forehead paint, darkened brows, crimson lips. I softened my voice. When I looked at him, I copied what the nanny had taught me. Eyes shining, words caught in my throat, as if I couldn't quite speak. Alexander G gave a snort of laughter and didn't look at me at all. "Sorry to keep Princess waiting." "Not long." I watched his straight back, my smile nearly impossible to hold in. Fine clothes, a spirited horse, a graceful young man, someone this outstanding was my husband. I invited Princess today to watch an opera. He sat in a carved wooden chair, expression blank. The storyteller withdrew. Painted actors took the stage, singing in thin, lilting voices. The moment they began, I understood what Alexander G wanted me to hear. They were performing the tale of Princess Selena of the former dynasty, childless, and in the end her consort took a second wife. Chloe didn't need to remind me. I knew how pale I'd gone. Sitting beside me was the young man I loved. He had never liked me, this I knew, but I had never imagined he would insult me like this. Childless. And why was I childless? Wasn't it because he had never once stepped into my courtyard? I kept my head down and forced the breath back into my chest. I didn't want to argue with him, not here, in this crowded tea house. If word got out, my younger brother would make trouble for him again. The song ended. Alexander G looked down at me, his voice icy. "What does Princess think?" "It's very good. I'm happy you invited me, husband." I lifted my face and pretended not to understand. He probably hadn't expected me to play dumb. Alexander G froze for a moment. For once, a blank look crossed his usually indifferent eyes. After a long pause, he gave a cold snort, stood, and left with a sweep of his sleeve. I sat there in silence, staring at the bowl of peanuts I'd prepared so carefully. He hadn't touched a single one. He hadn't even glanced at them. "Let's go back." I braced a hand on the square table, barely keeping myself steady. I hadn't expected it to end there. Besides Alexander G, the G clan also had Lady G. Almost as soon as I returned, she summoned me to the G ancestral hall. Before the tablets of the G ancestors, she didn't tell me to kneel, and she didn't offer me a seat. After I paid my respects, I stood there and listened to her drone on and on. She spoke of how Alexander G had lost his father and elder brother young, how at 14 he entered the military camp alone, How at 20 he rose to fame in a single battle. She listed every hardship he'd endured. I knew them all. Those years when Alexander fought and clawed his way through the frontier marches, I learned them through letters. In the letters, the young man was full of valor and pride. He wrote of the blood-red great desert, even the sound of blades punching into flesh. At the end, perhaps afraid such things would frighten a sheltered girl, he would add, hesitant and gentle, "Don't be afraid, I'm strong, I'll protect you." People say handwriting reveals the person. I could recite that line silently. I could picture the high-spirited youth taking off his silver armor, lifting his brush by candlelight, so tender. If only those letters had been for me. But they weren't. When Alexander G. lived with death at the edge of a blade, every letter sent back to the capital, every unmistakable word of love, never belonged to Princess Aurora. Just thinking about it made my heart ache so badly I could hardly breathe. My chest felt heavy, sharp with pain. It hurt too much. My face must have looked dreadful. Lady G grew more and more animated, but through the blur I could only catch 3 words. Childless. In an instant, I understood. I dug my nails hard into my palm to keep my voice steady. Is this what Mother wants, or what my husband wants? Using childless as an excuse to make Alexander G take a second wife. Whose idea was it? The G family's or Alexander G's? Despair spread through me, yet my mind was clear. Even if it wasn't Alexander G's own plan, the fact that he had taken me to the tea house to watch that opera was enough to show his attitude. He had never cared about me. He was the most unrestrained young man in the world. He believed I had tied up his entire life, so he hurt me without restraint, trying to reclaim what he'd lost, his freedom and his love. After a brief silence, I got my answer. Lady G's voice sharpened. Being childless violates one of the 7 grounds. Alexander didn't divorce you, and that's already your blessing. Now it's only taking a second wife. You want to stop it? I stared at her wrinkled face for a long time. Then I laughed. The laughter grew louder and louder until tears spilled out and I couldn't hold them back. In our half-year of marriage, I had kept my head low in the G residence, so some people truly thought I was easy to bully, like Lady G right now. That wouldn't do. I loved Alexander G, so he could bully me. But no one else could treat me as if I didn't matter. Lady G, have you forgotten who I am? I lifted my brows and swept a glance over the ancestral tablets, my voice colder still. I am the Jin Empire's eldest princess, titled Aurora. The emperor on the throne is my younger brother. Do you really think I can't stop it? Lady G's face turned iron gray. Furious, she struck the ground with her cane, eyes blazing. Fine, fine. If Princess thinks our G-clan has wronged you, then I'll have Alexander divorce you. I'd spent the last 6 months trying to please her. One act of defiance, and she tore off the mask. The G family's hearts were made of stone. If you can do it, then go ahead. I didn't want to argue. I only hardened my expression. Alexander has been back in the capital for barely half a year. In court, those who flatter him still show some respect because of me. Think carefully. Who are you telling to think carefully? Alexander G's voice was urgent and angry. The door slammed open so hard even Lady G flinched. Lady G looked as if she'd found her savior and hurried to complain. Alexander, listen to her. This is the wife you married. Meeting Alexander G's cold eyes, I suddenly thought of a letter he once sent. He wrote that nights in the great desert were bitterly cold. The moon like a curved blade, ready to stab straight into your heart. Now I saw that blade in Alexander G's eyes. Yes. Cold, just as he'd said. Back then, when he said it was cold, I pricked my fingers sewing him a winter coat. Now I was the one who felt cold, yet I couldn't even earn a single comforting look from him. If I had never fallen for him, I wouldn't be this pathetic now. Princess thinks I, Alexander G, am borrowing your power? His face was terrifyingly dark. Even if I denied it or explained, I knew he wouldn't believe a word. But I still tried. Alexander, listen to me. Mother wants you to remarry, but I don't. Before I could finish, Alexander G cut in, voice flat. I know. The rest of my sentence stuck in my throat. Not a single word came out. Mother and I have discussed it. Your status is too high. The G residence is small. It can't hold someone like you. If you won't accept it, then let's divorce. In the half year since we married, no matter how impatient he was with me, he had never said the word divorce. It hit me like a bolt of lightning. I stood there, stunned. Everything went silent. After a moment, I shook my head. Alexander G., you can't divorce me. I couldn't bear it. He looked at me coldly. In the end, you're only thinking about my command token. Fine. I'll resign my post. I hadn't even had time to speak when Lady G realized something was wrong. Foolish. A general's post isn't something you can resign just because you say so. The G family had endured for so long, finally counting on Alexander to return them to the ranks of noble houses. I understood. Lady G couldn't bear to lose it. Alexander G's eyes were dark as a deep pool. He watched me, as if waiting for a single sentence. Then, only one syllable slipped out, and then I didn't know what to say. Don't resign? Don't hate me? Or don't divorce me? Perhaps he found my tear-filled eyes ridiculous. Alexander G pressed his lips together. For once, he didn't continue. He only lowered his gaze, flicked his sleeve, and left. He left so easily, leaving me and Lady G staring at each other. She snorted and turned to go. Lady G. My face went cold. I won't say more. Go ask around about the name Princess Aurora. Then, think it through. Before General Alexander G returned to the capital, everyone already knew the name Princess Aurora. Two things, in particular, made my notoriety spread. First, I cast aside my original consort, Benjamin Jang. Second, I forced my way into marriage with Alexander G. Either one was enough for tea-house gossip. People embroidered them into countless shameless romances. Everyone pitied General Alexander G for being forced to marry a princess with a ruined name. On the day I married Alexander G, Benjamin Jang and Grace Lin secretly had someone deliver a letter. It contained only 2 words, sorry. By the wavering candlelight, I burned it to ash. I didn't deserve that apology. If you really looked at it, I chose this path myself. No matter what others guessed, I knew the truth. Being able to marry Alexander G made me happy. Besides, Benjamin Jang and I had no feelings at all. Rather than bind him to me and ruin 3 people, it was better for me to play the villain. Only, not a single word of our plan could be told to Alexander G. The boy who fought bloodily on the frontier marches with a spear in his hands sent letter after letter to the capital, soaked in real feeling. They were all for Grace Lin. But he loved, and she did not. Alexander G had hated me since childhood. If he ever learned that the letters he treasured like jewels were actually written by me, that the winter coat he stored away so carefully was sewn by me, that the Grace Lin he longed to return and marry was someone I had secretly arranged to fake her death so she could flee with Benjamin Jang, I couldn't imagine his reaction. Even the hatred of murdering a father and digging up a grave wouldn't be this cruel. I sighed and returned to my courtyard. All these years, I never dared tell him. I feared he would truly despise me. I feared he would hate me. One day, even Princess Aurora learned the meaning of fear. In the deep night, whenever the thought came, I would curl up alone and swallow the bitterness of loneliness and dark. Perhaps it was too bitter. In that solitude, I fell into a heavy sleep and dreamed of the past. The first time I saw him was at a palace flower viewing banquet. I was only 15. I spotted Alexander G by the corridor. 16 years old, he sat atop a low rockery. One leg was bent at the knee, the other swung lazily. He leaned back on one hand, head tilted up, watching a glass lantern hanging from the eaves. All around was dark. The lantern's warm yellow flame, filtered through a peony-patterned shade, spilled softly across his face, like carved jade. Hearing movement, the boy glanced down at me from above. His phoenix eyes gleamed as they turned. "Why are you staring at me?" His voice was cool and clear, with a touch of arrogance. The night breeze carried a faint floral fragrance. It stirred his wide sleeves. The hem of his pale robe shifted slightly with the wind. I remember it clearly. In that instant, my heart moved with it. After forcing down a swallow, I spoke with confidence. "If you weren't looking at me, how would you know I was looking at you?" Proud people never let themselves lose. So there we were. 16-year-old Alexander G sitting on the rockery and me standing below it, trading words back and forth, sparring like enemies. It's laughable. I'm someone who can't even recite poems, yet I still remember that childish quarrel perfectly. I haven't forgotten a single line. And I still remember Alexander G's final cold snort, saying, "I didn't have a trace of a young lady's manners, and whoever married me would argue with me every day, and the household would never know peace." He was wrong. In the half-year he's been married to me, he has hardly spoken to me at all. Where would daily arguments come from? But after that senseless fight, we became enemies. Afterward, at the monthly literary gatherings, he descended from a military house, showed up every time, again and again, just to needle me. Petty to the core. Back then, I thought it was his way of getting my attention. Not until I saw how gentle he could be with another woman. Grace Lynn was my study companion. Among noble daughters, her family wasn't the best, but that didn't stop me from being close to her. She was truly gentle. Even someone as rough as I was didn't want to raise my voice in front of her. So I could understand why Alexander G's gaze clung to her. Why more than once he forgot to bicker with me because he was too busy watching her. But in this world, the most terrifying and most ordinary thing is the word change. In only 2 years, the old General G and the G family's eldest son both died on the battlefield. Overnight, Alexander G went from the capital's young tyrant to the G family's sole surviving heir. Worse still, that lone heir insisted on going to war. By then, my younger brother had ascended the throne, and I had become the admired eldest princess. The moment I heard, I rushed to the hall. Before I even caught my breath, I gave an order. Don't let Alexander G go to war. My emperor brother smiled at me and asked, why? Because I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear to let him taste the bitterness of the borderlands. I couldn't bear for him at 18 to shoulder the entire G clan. But I couldn't say those things. I was still a young girl. I was too self-conscious. So I forced out a line I didn't mean at all. I want him to stay in the palace and keep me company. That wasn't it. That wasn't what I meant to say. I jolted awake from the dream, my back soaked in sweat. A gust of wind cut through, and even my heart turned cold. I still remembered clearly. After I said that, Alexander G stepped out from behind the screen. His face was iron dark, as if he'd suffered a great humiliation. His cold gaze swept over me. Princess treats me like a toy for amusement. I'd rather fight on the frontier marches and die wrapped in horsehide. My first reaction was to stop him from saying something so ominous. Only then did I realize he was angry. That moment of hesitation made me forget to explain. Not until Alexander G swept away did I remember to argue, my voice belated. I didn't mean it. My younger brother, for some reason, sighed. Sister, I've already approved it. The G army can't be left without a commander. Yes, the G family was full of martyrs. A soldier's blood ran in their bones. I couldn't stop Alexander G. I would only make him angrier. I sat quietly on my bed, listening to the wind outside the window. After Alexander G left, I tried every way to get news from the frontier marches, hoping to find even a few words about the boy I loved. That bitter stretch lasted 2 months. Just when I was pleased with the scraps of news I'd pieced together, Grace Lynn came to me, face full of panic. Princess, what do I do? I stared at the dark envelope she held out. The writing on it was neat, formal, beautiful. The moment I saw the signature, my eyes reddened against my will. Alexander G, second son of the G family. It was a letter from Alexander G to Grace Lynn. While I was like a fool trying to guess whether he was safe, he wrote a letter to Grace Lynn. Grace Lynn sighed and asked me, I can't return this feeling. Princess, think of a way to help me cut it off. I held that letter as if I were holding the boy's burning heart. It was so hot my fingertips hurt, and my own heart hurt with them. I knew Alexander G's gentle gaze didn't belong to me, yet I held on tight and wouldn't let go. Every stroke in the letter was careful, precious. He wrote about his life there, his ambitions. And the last line, if you don't find it troublesome, could you allow me to send 1 letter each month? I don't want my ties to the capital to be severed. In those measured words was nothing but cautious longing. I had never seen Alexander G so careful, so afraid. I suppose in front of someone you love, everyone becomes timid. That night, I held the letter and stared at the red candle flame, awake until dawn. The pain of carving out one's heart, what the storybook spoke of, I finally understood. But I didn't think about how to steal Alexander G back. I didn't think about whether to kill the feelings in his heart. I only thought about how to reply. I couldn't bear to see him sad. I couldn't bear for him to end up like me, quietly loving someone, receiving no answer. So when dawn finally broke, I ground ink, raised my left hand, and clumsily wrote back in Grace Lynn's voice. I said only that I'd injured my right hand by accident. so for now I had to write with my left. Thinking of it now, I lifted my left hand. In the thin moonlight slipping in, I rubbed at the corner of my eye. I wrote for Alexander G. with my left hand for 4 years. I trained it into a beautiful, delicate script. People say handwriting reveals the person. Through those letters, I watched him grow, from a new soldier in the military camp who bowed to no one, into a general whose word could not be challenged. He was the proud young man I watched become a man. My engagement to Benjamin Zhang was delayed again and again. To avoid Chief Minister Zhang's relentless pressure, I even pretended to be ill. And it was when Benjamin Zhang came into the palace to visit me that he ran into Grace Lin, just leaving my quarters. I wasn't lucky enough to know what it felt like for two people to love each other. When the two of them knelt before me and confessed their affair, my first thought was, if Alexander G finds out, how heartbroken he'll be. I pictured the boy's disappointment, the reddening of his eyes. My heart clenched in pain. I couldn't bear his pain, and I couldn't bear to be the one to tear lovers apart. In the end, I was the only one who got hurt. I shook out my hand and in the whitening light of morning began to think about what to eat for breakfast the next day. I didn't expect Alexander G to come eat breakfast with me. His robe was dirty, his expression was unreadable. He looked as exhausted as I did after a sleepless night. His voice was hoarse, yet gentler than I'd ever heard. A new place just opened in the capital, Fragrance House. Princess. Wife, do you want to go and try it? I startled so hard my hand trembled and the pastry fell to the floor. He had never called me wife. What was happening today? In my suspicion, I caught that trace of chill in his eyes, but I couldn't bear to tear apart this sliver of tenderness. So I forced a smile and answered, all right. I didn't know what he had gone through last night. I didn't know why he had suddenly softened and come to me, but as long as he asked, I could always say, all right. The food at Fragrance House was truly delicious. The osmanthus cakes were so sweet, sweet all the way down to my heart. Maybe I drank too much sweet rice wine. My head went light, and Alexander G in front of me blurred too. Wine makes coward brave. With my eyes half closed, I leaned toward him as if by accident. I was already prepared. If he didn't catch me, I would simply collapse against the chair. To my surprise, I fell into a warm embrace. Alexander G held me. The motion was stiff, but his body was warm. Half awake, half dreaming, I clung to him. My unfocused eyes drifted to the white jade cup on the table. The cup was so beautiful. The wine pot, too. Everything here made me happy because at this moment, I was in the arms of the boy I loved most. Just as I was secretly thinking I'd buy this room when we left, Alexander G suddenly leaned close to my ear and asked, back then, how did Grace Lin die? His voice was low, edged with gritted teeth. All my happiness vanished at once. I pretended I hadn't heard him clearly and let my eyes fall shut. Sleep, hurry. If I slept through it, it would be fine. No matter what happened when I woke, at least I could keep this night like a treasure. Alexander G knew nothing of my pitiful little thoughts. His goal had been to get me drunk. His words even carried a probing intent. A year ago, Grace Lin was gravely ill. You visited her several times. Half a month before I returned, she died. Was it you? Was it you? Those 3 words were more terrifying than any accusation I had ever heard. I once thought that writing back in Grace Lin's voice that night had already shown me the full bitterness of love. I hadn't expected anything could be worse. Princess Aurora should never have lived like this. I guessed he had suspected me for a long time. He had played along with me all this time, only to uncover the cause of Grace Lin's death. I knew I hadn't arranged Grace Lin's fake death perfectly. But I had no choice. Alexander G wrote that he would return in 1 more month. He even spoke with joy, preparing to go to the Lin estate with a formal proposal. I had no choice but to move Grace Lin's death date up. When Benjamin Zhang and Grace Lin left, they smiled and thanked me. I stared at her face for a long time. A woman in love is probably most beautiful in that moment. I truly envied her. And me. Even an embrace was a lie. With a bitter laugh, I sat up and staggered to the opposite side of the table. With 7 parts drunkenness in me, I spilled out everything I'd never dared to say. Alexander G, you love Grace Lin, don't you? Perhaps shocked that I wasn't fully drunk, he froze, then forced out a stiff answer. Yes. I didn't know why I asked at all, why I had to pull the thorn from my own heart, place it in his hand, and give him one more chance to hurt me. I was foolish. Completely, hopelessly foolish. What blurred my vision wasn't only drink. Heat gathered there, too. After a moment, I shook my head at him. Gracelyn is dead. It wasn't me. In the end, I still lied to him. Gracelyn had already fled with Benjamin Jang. Even if he found them, what would it change? It would only create one more heartbroken person. Alexander G's face darkened. Princess Aurora, I hate being lied to. I know. So the truth that I used my left hand to imitate Gracelyn's handwriting and write those letters for you will rot inside me. I'll die before I say it. I underestimated Alexander G's obsession. 3 days later, rumors spread all over the city about him and Clara Lynn, Gracelyn's elder sister. The story was detailed, convincing, and I received a divorce agreement. How ridiculous. He couldn't marry Gracelyn, so he would marry her sister Clara Lynn. Even settling for second best, he never considered me. I wasn't silent at first. I made a scene. But Alexander G's guards trapped me in a detached courtyard. I couldn't take a single step out. Now that he had power, he even dared to confine the eldest princess. Well done. The marriage must have been nearly decided. Red ribbons hung everywhere, grand and festive. I stared at the red lanterns, bored out of my mind, thinking, the streets will have a new story again. The princess has fallen from favor, or how perfectly matched Alexander G and Clara Lynn are. I couldn't name what I felt. Watching the guards with drawn swords blocking me, I crouched by the courtyard gate. I laughed, and then I cried. My reputation for jealousy was too fierce. In the end, he feared it. So before the marriage was fully settled, Clara Lynn came to see me once. She came to threaten me. She knew everything. Gracelyn's fake death, the letters. As a woman, how could she not see my obvious feelings? So Clara Lynn smiled and told me that as long as I agreed to let Alexander G marry her as a second wife, she would not tell him a single word of it. With my temperament, I should have jumped up and slapped her twice, sneering, "In your dreams." But I was tired. Truly tired. Ever since Alexander G began probing me, my limbs had been cold. Maybe it was because the love at the tip of my heart had gone cold. I lowered my chin. Anything. Whatever you want. Alexander G was never mine to begin with. The position of Lady G wasn't mine either. All I wanted was for him to like me. But wanting what you can't have is the most ordinary thing in the world. I had to let go. My younger brother had tried to persuade me for so long. In these past 6 months, I had slammed into a wall again and again, and at last I learned what pain was. Less than half an hour after Clara Lynn left my courtyard, Alexander G came too. I had always hoped he would enter my courtyard, so I could pull him along and show him the flowers and plants I had tended with such care, tell him where I liked to read, which brush felt best in my hand. But times change. Now when I saw him, all I wanted to say was, "Alexander G, don't worry. I won't stop you from taking another wife." The young man's indifferent face twitched. Anger rose in his eyes. "What trick are you playing now?" I didn't take his strange tone to heart. I nodded. "Yes. Give me the divorce agreement." I'd thought those 2 lines through for a long time. I'd rehearsed them in my head countless times. I had loved him once, after all. I still wanted a clean ending with him. I didn't expect Alexander G to explode. He swept a hand across the table, overturning it. My ink brushes, paper, and inkstones scattered across the floor. He seemed frantic with rage. His words were harsh and fast. "You'll get the divorce agreement, but first I need to be sure you didn't do something filthy." In a flash, I understood. Alexander G had never believed me. He had decided Gracelyn's death had to be connected to me. When the heart dies, nothing is sadder. Only then did I truly taste what those words meant. I laughed softly. I thought of Gracelyn and Benjamin Jang's smiles when they left. I wanted so badly to hold the hand of the one I loved and go anywhere at all, so long as it was in joy. Not like me, ruined in the street's gossip, stripped of the little happiness and pride I once had, all because I loved someone. These 6 months of marriage to Alexander G had been too bitter. That very day, I left the G residence. I was the eldest princess. I had plenty of shadow guards at my command. With my status, if I truly wanted to leave, how could Alexander G's few guards stop me? It was I who offered Alexander G my weakness. So I deserved the pain. When I went to see the emperor, I clearly saw panic in the young emperor's eyes. He stammered, "Sister, General G used his war merits to request marriage." I had no choice but to agree. I told him I knew. From beginning to end, I knew Alexander G's heart had never been with me. Before, I insisted. Now, since I couldn't have it, I was letting go. Still kneeling, I didn't rise. My attitude was respectful. "I've come to ask for two things. The first was the divorce agreement. Whatever entanglement I had with Alexander G would end here. The second was an edict assigning me to guard the Imperial Mausoleum. Princess Aurora, aware of her own misconduct and willful temper, after divorcing General G, requests to go guard the Imperial Mausoleum and never again set foot in the capital. I asked for nothing else. I only wanted to leave this place that had broken my heart with dignity." 2 edicts were delivered to the general's manor at the same time, and at the same time, I climbed into a carriage and left. The day I left was bright and clear. Flowers shook loose in the wind, scattering across the road that carried me away. Alexander G, Princess Aurora, and I had never gotten along. I'd never met a woman so willful. She was like the most flamboyant red in the world, never caring what anyone thought, blooming on her own, dazzling and scorching. Compared to her, Grace Lynn fit my idea of a future wife much better. Back then, I rode hard and trained in martial arts. My head was full of too many things, and I never really stopped to examine what I felt. Until the day the G clan fell. With my eyes burning red, I begged the emperor to let me go to war. From behind a screen, I heard Aurora's voice, furious, insisting I couldn't go. And her reason was absurd. She said I should stay in the palace to keep her company, to entertain her. Entertain her. What did she take me for? A plaything? I was born proud. How could I swallow that humiliation? In that moment, I didn't even know why I was so angry. Was it what she said, or the fact that she was the one who said it? In the end, I gritted my teeth and went to war. The moon over the frontier marches was truly cold. The dust kicked up by war horses was cold too. I wore black armor, and at first I couldn't sleep night after night. The moment I closed my eyes, I saw a blood-soaked battlefield, blades flashing with icy light. So I wrote a letter back to the capital. In truth, I wrote that harmless little letter twice. The first time, I addressed the envelope to Princess Aurora. But when I came to my senses, I remembered what she'd said in the great hall that day. I clenched my teeth, tore the envelope apart, and wrote Grace Lynn's name instead. If, back then, I'd followed my heart and sent that letter to Aurora, I wouldn't be sitting alone through these freezing nights now, unable to sleep, while loneliness and regret tore at me. I was too proud when I was young. I was always testing people, always wanting the other person to bow their head first. Youthful pride, every bone in my spine felt stiff. I was stubborn and refused to bend. In letters, my exchanges with Grace Lynn grew more and more pleasant. Each one, full of concern, tapped at my solitary heart. Those letters were written too well. Seeing the handwriting was like seeing the person. I fell in love with the one who wrote them. So I thought I had fallen in love with Grace Lynn. When life and death hung by a thread on the battlefield, I believed that aching longing the letters stirred in me was love. I made promises to myself. I told myself I loved Grace Lynn, and I would marry her. It turned out I'd been wrong from the beginning. I was wrong for being too proud. I was wrong for realizing too late. That day, when I received 2 imperial edicts, I barged into her room. Strangely, she hadn't taken anything with her, yet I felt emptiness everywhere. I even chased all the way to the palace, desperate to see her just once, but the emperor stopped me and asked, "And if you see her, then what?" Then what? Those 3 words left me speechless. After a long pause, I clenched my teeth and said, "Stiff, official, I need to find Princess Aurora and ask about Grace Lynn." I must have been out of my mind. Even as I said it, I knew it was a lie. It wasn't what I truly felt. But I was panicking. It was as if I knew something had slipped away. I reached for it with all my strength, and still couldn't hold on. That day, I fought the young emperor. His skills were no match for mine, yet I still let him land 2 punches. Because through clenched teeth, he told me Aurora's wish was never to see me again for the rest of her life. I went back in a daze. In a room drenched in red, I suddenly remembered the year I married Aurora. Everything had been that same red. She wore a red wedding robe. In the wavering candlelight, she was breathtaking. Her eyes were so bright, like stars fallen into a pool of water. That night I'd been full of resentment, yet in the face of those clear, smiling autumn eyes, I still couldn't help but slow my breathing. I shook my head and told myself not to think too much. I told myself Aurora's willful, vicious temper made the divorce suit her perfectly. But I hadn't wanted to marry Clara Lynn in the first place. I was only using her to find Grace Lynn. During that time, I searched every way I could, certain Grace Lynn was still alive. When I returned, the streets were in an uproar. People said Princess Aurora had secretly killed the original prince consort, Benjamin Zhang, and the Lynn estate's eldest daughter, Grace Lynn. Instinctively, I didn't believe it. But when rumors spread, they grow fangs. As the story grew wilder, I began to waver. I even suspected Aurora might harm Grace Lynn. On the third day after Aurora left me, I found signs of contact between Clara Lynn and Grace Lynn. I called off the absurd wedding and found Grace Lynn, who was supposedly already dead from illness. And I found the truth. When I broke off the engagement, Clara Lynn's eyes were red. Like a curse, like a prophecy, she said, "Alexander G., in this life you will lose the one you love. You'll grow old alone." Her words became fate. I watched Grace Lynn leaning against Benjamin Zhang. She frowned slightly. Her face held an open, indifferent calm. She told me that back then, she'd never replied to my letters, not from the start. She'd handed every one of them to Aurora. She described how Aurora had answered my letters with bright excitement in her eyes, writing with her left hand. She weighed every word, more serious than she'd ever been while answering the tutor's questions back at the academy. As I listened, my fingers dug into my palm. A metallic sweetness rose in my throat, and I spat out a mouthful of blood. I'd thought I was searching for the one in my heart, but the one in my heart was right in front of me. It was Aurora, the Aurora I'd deliberately ignored for so long. The moment I learned the truth, it felt as though I'd thought of countless things, and as though I'd thought of nothing at all. My mind held only the day I married Aurora and those beautiful eyes of hers. Ever since she left, I hadn't understood the hollow, aching pain inside me. At last, I had an answer. Aurora. I never thought I'd see Alexander G. again. Strictly speaking, I heard his voice. He stood stubbornly at the entrance to the Imperial Mausoleum. The sounds of fighting mixed with him shouting my name. His voice had gone hoarse, dry, painful. I didn't know why he'd come looking for me, but I knew he was an exceptional fighter. Those guards were innocent enough. With a helpless sigh, I pushed the door open and went out. General G. I looked at him coolly, taking in his disheveled clothes and the shallow cuts on his body. I'd never seen him so bedraggled. He stood there with a strange expression, as if 1,000 words were lodged in his throat. He managed only one sentence before his eyes reddened. Aurora, I found Grace Lynn. So he knew everything. In an instant, I understood the sorrow in Alexander G.'s eyes. I'd thought he was despondent because he'd learned the one he loved belonged to someone else. I never expected that when he spoke, it would be about something else. His voice was rough. He looked at me in grief and reached a hand toward me. The letters, why didn't you tell me? It was strange. Before, if I learned from a letter that he'd suffered even a small scratch, my heart would ache. Now, looking at his unbearable sorrow, my heart didn't stir at all. I lowered my eyes and spoke plainly. About the letters. I deceived you first. I owe you an apology, General G. I meant it sincerely. I didn't expect that as soon as I said it, Alexander G. would look as though his last bone had been pulled out. He was standing straight, yet it was as if something inside him collapsed completely. With reddened eyes, his voice broke in the wind. No, it's not your fault. I was the one who got it wrong. Amanda, will you come home with me? My given name is Amanda, taken from the line, Guan Guan cry the ospreys. When Alexander G. called me Amanda, I suddenly felt dazed. Back at the academy, the tutor's biggest headache had been Alexander G. and me. I was notorious for being impossible. Alexander G. was brilliant, yet whenever he ran into me, he lost all reason. The moment we met, we bickered, turning the whole academy upside down. But whenever the tutor punished me, Alexander G. always stepped forward and took every strike for me. That time, his palm had been beaten red. While he recovered, I copied texts for him to finish his assignments. Alexander G., shameless as ever, held up his injured hand. Watching me copy, he ordered me around with delight. Amanda, I'm thirsty. Amanda, I'm hungry. Thinking back now, it wasn't as though there had been no good days between us. At least before he went to war, before I spoke that cutting remark out of shyness, Alexander G and I had been the childhood sweethearts everyone envied. Companionship in youth, separation later, and in the end, suspicion and coldness. My voice turned sour. Alexander G, how did we end up like this? I hadn't been mistaken. Alexander G cried. That year, when nearly all the men of the G clan died on the frontier, his eyes were bloodshot and he bit his lips raw, yet he never shed a single tear. Now he stood quietly at the gate of the Imperial Mausoleum, looking at me. His face was pale, defeated. Amanda, I was wrong. Will you forgive me? I like you. I stared at him. Alexander G, what are you talking about? All I could find was ridiculous. On our wedding night, I was full of joy. What I got was you leaving with a flick of your sleeve. The night was so cold. Do you know I sat there all night, clutching my veil, watching the red candles burn down to nothing? The day I went into the palace to visit family, you found a clue about Grace Lynn and abandoned me halfway. I returned to the palace alone, and I still had to force a smile and make excuses for you. Do you know the main path of the Imperial Garden has 3,621 bluestone slabs? I counted them, one by one, as I wandered there alone. All this time after marriage, you never once looked at me properly. It's not that you didn't know I was being made miserable at the G residence. You just didn't care. Do you know that if I hadn't truly treated myself as the G clan's wife, I would never have endured that kind of spite from the inner quarters? Alexander G, do you know how long I waited for you to say those words? I waited until I thought there was no hope left in this life, until my heart went cold. If this is what you call liking someone, then I'm afraid I can't accept it. Strangely, with every sentence, Alexander G's back seemed to sink a little lower. By the end, he'd caved in completely. Tears streamed down his face, his skin was deathly pale. Trembling, he reached out as if to grab me, yet seemed afraid I would vanish. His hand hung in the air and didn't move again. I was wrong, Amanda. I was really wrong. Forgive me once, please. Give me a chance. Amanda, don't leave me. No. Expressionless, I stepped back. Alexander G, I don't like you anymore. Even 100 years from now, even if we both go down to the underworld, don't let us meet again. At the last moment before the door closed, I heard Alexander G howl. Amanda. I didn't respond. Back then, when we were young, I'd shouted at Alexander G, his ears bright red. Guan guan cry the ospreys, on the islet in the river. Gentle maiden, a nobleman's good match. He seeks her and cannot find her. Waking and sleeping he longs. Maybe the ending had been set from that very moment. Only I accepted it. If you can't have it, then let it go. I thought there was still time. That all I had to do was turn back. It was the most wretched ride of my life. The rains rubbed my palms raw, and even my hair knot had come loose. But this time, I didn't win. No matter how fast a horse runs, it can't catch up to the years of love Aurora spent until nothing was left. When she called me General G at the Imperial Mausoleum, without joy, without sorrow, I knew it was too late. I knelt on the ground, wanting to tell her everything. Every thought, every regret. But there was too much to say. 1,000 words jammed in my throat until all that remained was the one sincere heart she no longer cared for. When she asked how the two of us had come to this, I suddenly felt that even 1,000 arrows through the heart wouldn't be worse. Yes, why? If only I'd understood her clumsy feelings earlier. If only I'd learned sooner to tell admiration from love. Then, there wouldn't have been so many years between us. Years that could never be undone. I knelt there for 2 days. She never appeared again. In the end, the young emperor sent men to drag me up. Furious, he pointed at my nose and cursed. Alexander G, if you want to put on a pitiful act, don't do it here. Don't offend my elder sister's eyes. My throat was far too hoarse to speak. I could only shake my head. I hadn't meant to put on an act. This was the Imperial Mausoleum. I only wanted to beg them, beg the gods in the heavens. Bless Amanda with peace and ease in this life. Let her live a long life, and beg them too, that in the next life, I might still meet Amanda. How ridiculous. On the battlefield, I'd killed countless enemies. I'd never believed in any of this. Yet now I begged from the depths of my heart. In this life, Amanda would never give me another chance. All I asked was that there might be a next one. I said to the young emperor, "Now the realm is calm. I'm willing to hand over the military seal. I ask only that you grant me leave to stay here and keep watch." The young emperor frowned. "My elder sister won't see you again." I know. The metallic sweetness in my throat grew stronger. My face was blank. "I'll keep watch nearby. I won't cross the line by even half a step." To keep watch over her like this was enough. In the past, I left her alone to endure one hopeless night after another, tasting all the bitterness of waiting. Now it was my turn to wait. The young emperor fell silent for a long time, then agreed, but he still wasn't satisfied. He threw out one last harsh line. "You didn't love my elder sister before. Why put on this show now?" With permission granted, I let out a bitter laugh and collapsed to the ground. How could I not have loved her? Even now, I remember every word she said when we quarreled at the academy, every vivid expression on her face. I also remember the way her eyes grew lonelier after she married me. I still remember, in those early days when my blue robe was thin and the hall was full of red sleeves calling out, I was at my most reckless. There were too many beauties and too many scenes to admire. So, I completely forgot that moment at the flower viewing banquet when I sat atop the rockery, looked down, met Amanda's eyes, and felt my heart flutter. If there's a flower to pluck, pluck it now. Don't wait until there are no flowers left and only bare branches remain. In this life, I deserve to be lonely to the end. Years later, the streets were still full of people who loved a good story. Everyone said Princess Aurora's life was legendary. At 17, she abandoned her original prince consort, Benjamin Jang. Later, she divorced General Ji and requested to guard the Imperial Mausoleum, vanishing without a trace. And General Ji, after the divorce, never married again. He relinquished military power and disappeared. They clicked their tongues in amazement whenever they spoke of it. Only I knew how many twists were buried inside. Only I knew that in Princess Aurora's legendary life, she once loved a self-righteous fool, and that fool ground away every last bit of her love. I was that fool.